Hello everyone, the Nerdy Steve here. Today I will be featuring a Jund Explore Sacrifice deck. The link to the list is in the description below. I'll be going over some of the general game plan, specific card choices, a little bit about the sideboard, and then we'll play some matches. So, let's go. Jund Sacrifice, or this specific version rather, because there are a lot of different ways you can build it and a lot of different cards you can have as a general endgame. But here we're focusing on a couple of different things. First, we have our Cauldron Familiar and Witch's Oven, which is a combo if you played Standard over the past couple of years or Historic or Explorer. You should know that with Witch's Oven, you can sacrifice a creature to get a food, right? And then you have Cauldron Familiar, where when it's in your graveyard, if you sacrifice a food, you bring it back to the battlefield. And with Cauldron Familiar and Witch's Oven, you create this very, very powerful combo for only 2 mana that you can have a creature in play. It can block anything without trample. You can sacrifice it, the Cauldron Familiar, to create a food, and then you can repeat that over and over again by sacrificing the food that it creates to bring it back to chump block again. Now, if your opponent doesn't have any chump blockers or anything, you're still making your opponent lose 1 life and gaining 1 life. So over the course of 20 turns, let's say, right, you can kill an opponent without ever attacking or spending more mana than your initial investment, right? And that's very, very powerful. But there is more to this deck than that. On top of the Cauldron Familiar and Witch's Oven combo, you also have Trail of Crumbs, where whenever you sacrifice a food, so if you use the Cauldron Familiar to ability from the graveyard to bring it back to the battlefield, you can pay 1 mana to look at the top 2 cards of your library. If one of them is a permanent card, you can put it into your hand. So now, every time you activate your Witch's Oven and Cauldron Familiar loop, you're basically drawing a card. Which before with the Oven and Familiar was powerful, now you're finding more parts of, you can find more Witch's Ovens. You can find other parts of this deck that make it really, really, really good. So the Trail of Crumbs is now allowing you to generate card advantage by finding things that you need and that will win the game, right? So that's another outer layer of this puzzle, right? And then we can add Mayhem Devil on top of it, where whenever you sacrifice a permanent, Mayhem Devil deals 1 damage to any target. So now, with your Cauldron Familiar and Witch's Oven, every time you loop, you're now dealing 2 extra damage. And it doesn't just have to be to your opponent, it could be to their planeswalkers or other problematic creatures, or really anything you want. Right? So now, with the Mayhem Devil and Trail and Familiar and Oven, everything starts to pile on top, and you are really, really generating a very lethal threat very, very quickly, and can win out of nowhere. And then, finally, we have Korvold Fae-Cursed King, which is whenever the main ability of this is whenever you sacrifice a permanent, put a +1/+1 counter on Korvold. So with Korvold out, and a Witch's Oven and Cauldron Familiar, you can easily draw 3 cards a turn, at least. And then if you add anything else to this, so another Witch's Oven, so you're looping again and drawing 2 additional cards. If you have Mayhem Devil, you're now doing 3 or 4 damage a turn, right? Doing anything. And what's really, really powerful with the Korvold and with the Trail of Crumbs is you're finding more pieces every turn that they are alive, right? So it's a very, very consistent combo piece. Trail of Crumbs can find Mayhem Devil, which can find Korvold, right? Korvold, if it's like you don't have a lot of pieces out, can help you find a Trail of Crumbs, or can help you find the Witch's Oven that you need. So all of this develops into a very, very tight package where you're kind of feeding into itself, where you eventually overwhelm your opponent. And then we have more specific card choices here. We have Gilded Goose, which a turn 1 Gilded Goose into a turn 2 Trail of Crumbs is a really, really, really powerful thing in this deck, right? Because from that point forward, you can, at the opponent's end step, use Gilded Goose to sacrifice a food to generate 1 mana. And with that 1 mana, you can pay for the triggered ability from Trail of Crumbs to look at the top 2 cards and find one of them. So already on turn 2, you're starting to use Trail of Crumbs to create this advantage that can then be used to help find your Witch's Oven or your Cauldron Familiar, right? And so that's why Gilded Goose is here. We also have Deadly Dispute, which you can sacrifice a creature or a treasure to draw, or an artifact to draw 2 cards and create a treasure token. And look, you can sacrifice a Cauldron Familiar or a food token. And if you sacrifice a food token and you have Trail of Crumbs out, you get to trigger Trail of Crumbs. So Deadly Dispute can a lot of times be a way to, if I've done it before where you've had 2 Trail of Crumbs out on the battlefield, you sacrifice a food, and it's basically for 4 mana, you draw 4 cards at instant speed, and then you also generate a treasure, right? And it's really, really powerful and really, really good. And it helps just put everything together in this deck. And then we have here Fable of the Mirror Breaker, which is a very, very powerful saga. It helps you create a 2/2 that, has a treasure that when it attacks, it creates a treasure. And hey, treasure is something that if it's sacked, it triggers Mayhem Devil. It triggers Korvold, right? Then it also has the stage 2, which you can discard 2 cards and draw that many cards. This is actually very, very surprisingly powerful in this deck. And a lot of the reason Fable Mirror Breaker is played in a lot of decks is because it really, really helps with the threat density. It creates 2/2/2 creatures on its own, but the second stage can also loot away cards in your hand that you don't need, like lands. And drawing cards is very, very important, right? Obviously. But in this deck, it's really, you can discard first of all Cauldron Familiar. Discarded to Fabled Mirror Breaker is really, really wonderful because Cauldron Familiar is fine when it goes into your graveyard because you can bring it back whenever you want if you have a food. So it's kind of like drawing an additional card when you do that. But because this deck is so synergistic, getting rid of any card that currently you don't need and drawing into a Trail of Crumbs or a Witch's Oven. There are so many parts of this puzzle, and Fable and Mirror Breaker really, really pulls all of that together. And Reflection of Kiki Jiki, if you ever can make a copy of Mayhem Devil, you can just literally deal 18 damage out of nowhere by doubling your sack effects. Mayhem Devil, one Mayhem Devil is always really problematic for your opponent, but 2 Mayhem Devils is basically game, right? And then I want to go into Binding the Old Gods is a 4 mana permanent that can be found with Trail of Crumbs, and that is very, very important here. One of the reasons why Binding the Old Gods is in this deck, or that I put it in here, is because I've been finding that there are times where there are different types of permanents that I want to be able to destroy. And I haven't really. There's Assassin's Trophy, and there are other things that are fairly versatile, but Binding is something that I found to be the best so far. Destroying an online permanent is great. Being able to search your library for Ziatora's Proving Ground or anything that can really, really help cement your mana. Not only does it ramp you, but it fixes you. And this deck can become, even though it has a lot of low cost cards, it is a very, very mana hungry deck. So that land ramp is very, very important, surprisingly. So, and then the creatures you control gain Death Touch isn't necessarily the most important part of this deck or of this saga, and it's usually irrelevant. However, there is a very, very key component to this, and that is Mayhem Devil. If you have Mayhem Devil out on the battlefield and a Binding the Old Gods third stage resolves, not only do all your creatures gain Death Touch, but immediately Binding is sacrificed due to it being a saga with 3 counters, and you deal 1 damage to anything. But with Mayhem Devil out, that 1 damage is Death Touch damage. So you can kill any creature you want. And I have done it where I have killed 3 Elder Gargaros in a single turn with Mayhem Devil, right? By sacrificing a Cauldron Familiar to a Witch's Oven and then bringing it back. And with the Binding the Old Gods, you can just literally annihilate a board. Mayhem Devil's already good in those positions anyway, but you can literally come out from behind the biggest board stall you could possibly imagine. And then I think I didn't talk about, so I have Voldaren Epicure. Voldaren Epicure it creates a blood token, which is kind of the important part here. It creates 2 bodies for Deadly Dispute if you ever need to, one of the problems with Deadly Dispute, it's a very, very powerful card, but you can often draw it and not have anything to sacrifice. And Voldaren Epicure adds that resilience where it's now 2 bodies, and so if one dies, you still have something else that you can use. And the blood token sacrifice is, again, you can loot away something, like when you have an extra land or something that you don't need, that extra loot is actually very, very important and comes into play a lot. And the Epicure can also, any creature you have in this deck, it can chump block, be sacrificed to a Witch's Oven, and now you have a food that you can use as a resource for Cauldron Familiar or for your Trail of Crumbs, right? We have Fatal Push I've gone up to 4 lately, and it wasn't always like this, right? But you need to be able to respond to aggressive strategies, or there are other cards like Greasefang that you need to interact with very, very quickly and very, very efficiently. And so Fatal Push is there out of necessity. It's not like involved in the bigger synergies of this deck. The synergy it has is keeping you alive. And then finally, I have Oni-Cult Anvil, which it's a card. I'm going to talk about a couple of these things. It's a very powerful card. Whenever you go through your Cauldron Familiar Witch's Oven cycle, right, you create a 1/1 construct. You can also, if you only have the Oni-Cult and a Witch's Oven and a construct token out, you can always, during your opponent's turn, block with the construct, sacrifice it to Witch's Oven so you have a food. Then during your turn, sacrifice that food to Oni-Cult, create a 1/1, and drain your opponent for 1. And you can repeat that over and over again, right? And so, Oni-Cult, I want to talk about, I used to have 4 Oni-Cults, and I've slowly gone down to 3, 2, and 1. And Oni-Cult does get better in multiples, so only having 1 is a little something I don't know if I'm in love with yet. Right now it's working for me. I would really like 2, but I want to talk about the other cards that how the numbers have changed. I only have 2 Fable of the Mirror Breaker here. And this is a card that, while it's really, really powerful and it helps me find what I want, it just isn't. It hasn't been working for me as well as I want. 3 mana is a lot to ask for in this deck where we're using it for our mana for so many things. And taking a turn where you're kind of not really doing anything isn't what we want to be doing. However, I've found that the treasure is important, the looting of the cards in your hand that you don't need is important, and the reflection of the Kiki-Jiki, while I talked about is really good with Mayhem Devil, is ultimately not the best in this deck, because we're not copying Graveyard Trespasser or Blood Tithe Harvester or any of the decks or cards that the black-red decks tend to be doing. So I only have 2 reflection of Kiki-Jiki, and I could see myself going up and down it. I also have the Voldaren Epicure I talked about. It's good and it has a place in this deck, but I am not absolutely in love with it. And I think maybe it could be something else. It could maybe even be like a Blood Tithe Harvester, the or I don't know what else. There's just it hasn't sold me yet. It does do something, and sometimes I do feel like I really want more one drop creatures, and that's why I put it in here because there's a lot of opportunities to use that mana, and like it just fits in a lot of the places where I want it to. But again, I'm not too sold on that. And so Epicure, Oni-Cult, and Fable are kind of the places where I'm playing with the numbers and finding out cards that I like or don't like. Binding also kind of fits there in a way. Binding maybe could be potentially something else, but right now I found that I need the removal. We also only have 3 Mayhem Devil and 3 Korvold, and they're both arguably one of the more powerful cards in this deck. But for me, I have found that with Korvold specifically, whenever I draw one Korvold, I always draw all 3. So it might be a little bit of bias here where I just feel like I never really want 4 in my deck because I'm always getting them at the same time. And you can, if you ever have like 2 in your opening hand, you kind of just need to mulligan. And mulliganing isn't that awful in this deck, but it happens so often to me where I want it to go down to 3, and it feels good at 3. You can still find it with the trail whenever you want to, but it's not something that I feel is clogging my hand up early game. And I've also gone down to 3 Mayhem Devils, and this is a concession to I feel that the metagame has evolved away from creature strategies. So Mayhem Devil, for me, just hasn't been as relevant as it has in the past. However, with the recent banning of Expressive Iteration and Explorer, I think maybe other creature strategies are going to start to fill that void and become more prevalent. And so maybe Mayhem Devil can go back up to 4 cards. And I also want to talk about how we have Jegantha as our companion, and we do not have Meathook in our deck. And that is a very, very important and really, really purposeful choice for this. Meathook is an enchantment that it does a lot of things, but when it enters battlefield, it from now on, whenever a creature you control dies, your opponent loses 1 life. And whenever an opponent creature dies, you gain 1 life. And what Meathook does is, when it's on the battlefield, it increases our clock with Cauldron Familiar so much. It doubles it, right? But then you can gain a lot more life by flinging your Mayhem Devil triggers at opposing creatures. It makes combat much worse for your opponent. It makes Fatal Push. You can kill your opponent, 1 creature, you can gain a life, and then do a lot of different stuff. So having a resolved Meathook is very, very, very good. But it costs 2 black mana. And I have found that the companion from the Jegantha has been so worth it. Being able to late game, if you don't draw anything or you have extra mana, to have a 5/5 creature that when you sacrifice it to Witch's Oven, it generates 2 food, right? Or the 5/5 threat itself is a really good way to pressure your opponent. And I've just found that extra card from the Companion Zone has always been worth it more than the Meathook drain and life gain. But it is something I think about a lot and I consider greatly. So it's just something that is how I built this deck and how I like to play. But I don't know if it's right or wrong yet. And then when we go to our sideboard, we have more specific removal, Ray of Enfeeblement and Noxious Grasp and Redcap Melee for white, red, and more green and white decks respectively, right? We have Thoughtseize for more control decks, Vraska for more generic removal that can be found with Trail of Crumbs, and Unlicensed Hearse. This deck can have a problem against Greasefang. And Unlicensed Hearse is just a resolved Unlicensed Hearse against Greasefang means that you never have to worry about Parhelion being reanimated ever again. And it is beautiful and wonderful, and I highly recommend that if you are losing to Greasefang. But with all of that, and all that overview, let's go play some games. Okay, this is a terrible hand, Will Mulligan. We don't need all those lands. This is also not a great hand, but we have an easy mulligan with our Cauldron Familiar. We do not need more than one. Right now, a lot of people are afraid to put Cauldron Familiar out on the battlefield turn 1 without any protection because it could be exiled with Portable Hole or March or a lot of different ways. Spike Field, whatever, the land from Zendikar. But I think we need to set up a Deadly Dispute on turn 2 to ensure or to increase our chance of drawing a land or fabling the following turn. Okay. And we drew another cat. We have another cat at the bottom of our library. But this is what we'll do. We don't know what our opponent's deck is. If they're aggro, 2 mountains is probably aggro. I'm going to Binding here. If we get a land, we're going to Dispute here. I might want to Binding, carry Zev here. It will save us a lot of damage here. The alternative is to cast the Fable of the Mirror Breaker, but I don't know if I love that yet. We really need to get a trail or something to... Like, that would be what we really, really want right now, because it's going to help us generate some type of card advantage. Because right now, our opponent still has 4 cards in hand, and that's a lot. I don't think we need to want a Fatal Push. I think we want to start getting our Fable of the Mirror Breaker active. And we want to play our lands. You also, in this deck, you want to, if you have Fable of the Mirror Breaker, you want to put a stop on your first main. Because you might draw a Deadly Dispute that you're going to potentially want to activate. So it is just something to pay attention to. We're going to discard a Familiar and a Goose here. I think we need to draw cards. Okay. And then I will attack with our Goblin Shaman. It has Death Touch, so if they block with the Torbrent, it will die. They will not do that. So then what I'm going to do is play a Swamp. We will cast Korvold, sacrificing a Pathway. We draw a card here. I don't think we need to Fatal Push now. I think we can just say go. But we're kind of in... If we get to untap, we're in a really, really good spot. Goblin Chain Whirler. So actually what I want to do, I'm going to tap for black there. Then I'm going to Deadly Dispute our Goblin Shaman. Because I think I want to use up more mana as I can, and I like having the Deadly Dispute. Having cast that already. Now we know that we're going to draw an Oven. So then I will black again. We draw, and I'm going to Fatal Push that. Because if we didn't use... It's a tricky thing, and I don't know if that's right or wrong. But I kind of wanted to Deadly Dispute that turn, and I didn't want to just sack the treasure to Fatal Push and not use the Dispute. Because I want to draw more cards there. Now, that 1 mana difference maybe was fine or not fine. I'm not sure. I'm not sure, actually. But our opponent's in a really, really rough spot now. If they attack, I don't know if we block. 5 damage is a lot for them to have to get through for Korvold. Chandra.
Don't think a fancy dress means I didn't come here to fight.
So the good thing is that we might just win here. And I think we might. Because we're going to draw a lot of cards. And GG. Now for mono red, a Redcap Melee, a Vraska. I want to take out... What do we want to take out here? Binding might be a little slow and it doesn't gain us like life like Vraska. I don't know if I love Fable, and I think we can go down to 3 Cauldron Familiar. So then do I want the binding? Binding is good. We don't know what type of sideboard they're gonna bring in. Because against... You really need to kill Rampaging Ferocidon in this matchup, or you will just lose. So I kind of like bringing in our cards that can kill it. And then we also don't have to be a little as hesitant or careful with our fatal pushes on the other things. This isn't a great hand, but... Oh, they have a Grafdigger's Cage? Okay, cool. So now we need to be cognizant of that, and we want to find our removal. Let's do that. We'll get a trail. Now we can still activate our cat if it's in the graveyard, even if our opponent has a Grafdigger's Cage. So that is something to know can happen. But this is really bad for us. Really bad. So I'm gonna Gilded Goose here. We're gonna take a lot of damage. Chandra, uh-oh.
What? My hair is on fire? I know.
Double red.
You're going down.
I don't like this. They're gonna kill the goose. Go to 13. Activate the blood. We can discard a Cauldron Familiar. Alright. We at least got... Oh, no. Oh, I meant to activate the Familiar. No, we just wasted our entire turn because it doesn't even gain life. So that was a mistake. That was a misclick on my part, everyone. So I apologize for that. Oh no. We spent 2 mana instead of 1.
This will be easy.
Alright, we're at 9. Jiki Jiki. Ooh, Deadly Dispute. So we're gonna Oni-Cult away our food token. We will drain our opponent for 1, create a 1/1. They will Abrade, so in response to Abrade, we will sacrifice the Oni-Cult. Now I'm gonna do this. So now what we have going on here is it's, again, unfortunate that the Grafdigger's Cage is going to stop our Cauldron Familiar. But what we really want to do is be able to deal enough damage to the Chandra so that it dies. Our opponent probably should attack here. But not sure. I have no idea what they could have in their hand. We are only at 6 life, which is not a lot of life. Okay. I'm gonna block. If our opponent has Ember Cleave, do they go for it? Oh, Stomp. Oh. Interesting. If we were able to play another Mayhem Devil before that treasure, that would have been wonderful. So now I think we have to wait to see what our opponent does. Opponent probably wants to Chandra pre-combat. I think. Maybe our opponent tries to use their treasure. Oh. It's a Stomp.
Gonna hurt.
That's interesting. That's very, very interesting. Dealing 2 to Mayhem Devil. What's in your hand? Wait, what? We're not gonna block anyway. And do that. And what I'm gonna do is sacrifice this Cauldron Familiar. Deal 1 to Chandra. So we don't have to worry about her. This Cauldron Familiar will die. Still at 8. That's fine. And then here, I'm gonna sacrifice the food to deal 1 to the giant. The treasure will deal another. Ooh. Get that. Let's deal 1 to the Kiki-Jiki. And then another to the Kiki-Jiki. Now, the Grafdigger's Cage is... We don't have as many threats as I would like, right?
Yup, you're going down.
So that's a little problematic. Because we can't bring anything, so we need to draw a goose and stuff like that, right? The block is declared. There. We can sacrifice the Mayhem Devil. Now, we could deal 1 to our opponent and then try to... We have a couple of decent draws where we can try and kill our opponent with Korvold and Cauldron Familiar. The opponent goes to 15. That's 7, and we draw. Oh. That might be good enough. Actually. If we do this, the Familiar kills. If we do this, they go to 14, back 13, 12, that goes up to 10. If we draw another Witch's Oven, I think we're fine. Maybe this is a little too aggressive, though. But I think we might have another turn anyway. We don't do anything here. I think the Deadly Dispute is game. Oh, yeah. Deadly Dispute with the Witch's Oven. So we're gonna get rid of the oven. Because we have, there. And then we have this. And it's game. Just making sure. Might as well do it all, because we're going to have to sacrifice something to the Korvold anyway. So, why not? There we go. GG. And now we wait. Maybe our opponents think about what they do here. GG, everyone. Okay. We go first. This is a very, very questionable keep. But keeping a 7-card hand is always a little better against the Thoughtseize. We still have to draw out of it. But we can. I have faith. Well, there's our Korvold again. Now, the reason why this was a bad hand, and I kept it to let you know about this, is that even if we drew another land, our Deadly Dispute isn't particularly wonderful. I also forgot to loot my cat. Don't do that. Like, we need a red source for this hand to become semi-functioning. Though, if our opponent gives us the time, it might be okay. Excuse me. Do they have a Colligan's command? Go to 18. We drew the land because, again, I know I trust my deck, everyone. Now, God. I'm gonna take the 3 here. I don't love it, but I'm not entirely sure what. I guess blocking is good here, because we also don't have a way. Oh, alright. Our opponent is gonna allow us to kill the Blood Tithe Harvester. And that means they probably don't have another land. Trade for trade. They know we have a binding. And they are gonna play. Let's just put that in our hand and say go. We need... What do we need? You don't block. Oh, our opponent is gonna blood again. Okay. A lot of bad things could happen here. The worst is us not drawing a land. I can accept a goose draw. I'm assuming a fatal push. Five. I think we do that now. And they're gonna probably fatal push our Gilded Goose. Right? Our Heartless Active? Okay. I wonder what else our opponent has in hand. So our opponent's deck has more interaction than they probably normally do, and because usually they have better threats. And that's good for us that they don't have it. I guess we don't want to do anything here. 5, okay. We could have just binding to get a land so we know the following turn we can Korvold. But I think it's worth it to knowing that we're going to kill Chandra.
I knew you needed my help.
Right? I wonder if they just try and get it Cauldron Familiar. That's funny. Alright. We're going to bring it back. Though. Our opponent goes to 6. That's not a lot of life. We will binding the Chandra. Probably should have done that post-combat, but...
Whatever. Figure it out on your own.
Another removal? Okay. But we're looking in a very, very good spot right now. Trespasser makes things a little more complicated, but I think we're fine. But actually what I'm gonna do here is Jegantha. Because I'm worried about our opponent having maybe some interaction for Korvold. And if we Korvold and they Heartless Act in response, that'd be very, very, very bad for us. So I'm glad we did that. I think we have to block here. Land? Ooh. Don't love that very much. Okay. Doing that? Okay. Oh, this is close. So our opponent, Glory Bringer. Cannot kill Korvold. It doesn't matter. So the gonna exile that. We have to... Oh, they did exert it, which was a mistake. And now we win. GG. Even if they didn't exert it, we won. So, what a what a game. I think we want the melee. I like Vraska and I like one Hearse against their deck. They have some graveyard synergies, and also being able to curse away the cards that they target with their Trespasser to stop the draining is really, really powerful. They probably have a Kroxa, and so Hearse is fine there. But we'll see. We kind of drew out of that one, but, you know, that's okay. And now we wait. Alright, here we go. Hmm. Not in love with this hand. You can hear that a lot. But Blood Tithe Harvester, okay. But I kind of like finding the old gods. We get to activate this trail once, at least. Thoughtseize, okay. But again, one of the things against the black-red decks is, in general, I do not like mulliganing against decks with Thoughtseize if you have a somewhat reasonable hand. And they're also not particularly aggressive, so... Oh, and there is the Kroxa. So that is something. The hearse is good. Maybe we want to bring in another one. I don't think so yet, but... Well... I don't even know what we want to binding here. That's gonna give them so much mana, but I don't think we want them... We don't want them to loot, and we also don't want them to have the Kiki Jiki down the line. Hopefully we live that long. Graveyard Trespasser is not fantastic for us. Oh, ouch. And, well, sometimes you literally only draw lands. We're dead on board. Our opponent is doing the math. And that's okay. Maybe that was supposed to be a mulligan. I'm not convinced yet, but okay. Not in saying that a lot. Not in love with this hand either. Oh, beautiful. Oh, alright. Good. This hand we drew out so perfectly. So our Deadly Dispute gets 3 cards here. Obviously, Fable sucks for us, but... we will Vraska the 2/2. And what I like here is our opponent can't threaten the Vraska yet, so Vraska might be able to do some cool stuff. Our opponent would need to stomp the Vraska now. And if not, he's going to become a really, really big potential threat, because being able to draw all the cards that she generates and destroy problematic permanents that our opponent has, and usually their deck stops at mana value 3, besides Chandra and Sorin, so Vraska can eliminate anything. So this is very, very good. Because in this matchup, if we can get to the mid game, I think our mid game with a reasonable board, our game plan is working, and that means we will win. Because with Trail and Oven and Vraska out, our opponent has to do stuff, otherwise our advantage is going to just become much more and more every turn. Maybe they have a Colligan's Command. If they have Colligan's Command, they definitely know to do that already, right? 2 damage to Vraska and kill the treasure? That's interesting that it took them that long. I guess, like, there's more... like, they obviously have a lot more to choose from and stuff, but interesting. I guess, like, do they want to save it to maybe kill the oven and not the treasure? Maybe that was the big decision there. Now Hearst is out, so we can stop worrying a lot about Proxa and the 3/3 Trespasser. We go to 13 here. Okay. They don't have Kroxa. If they had 5 cards in their hand, we might have needed to hearse it in. Oh, binding. And all that stuff dies. Okay. I guess we do this while our opponent doesn't have the Heartless Act available. Probably should have Hearst in response. Maybe, I don't know. I'll go to 10 here. I'm scared. I'm willing to admit it. Harvester? Okay. Alright. Think we can kill that? And then we will say go. So now the Hearst can crew the Korvold. And block, and then block is declared. Exile some to consume all cards. Or that. So we want to crew. Two blockers. Blockers declared. Do that. Okay. If our opponent has a stomp, we can get rid of the hearse. Noxious Grasp. Interesting. Yeah, I guess we do this now. And hope to draw something good. Those are all things that I'm happy to have drawn. I think that's fine. So I'm not casting the Familiar to be able to discard it to Kroxa, or if our opponent Thoughtseizes, we can Fatal Push the Harvester, and now they have to choose the Familiar. And so the Familiar goes to Graveyard and we get an activation of it. which we love. Ooh. Well, we need this. Deals 1. Oh, and we got a trail. Oh, beautiful. Want to sack it in response to deal the extra damage. But now we get to bring Cauldron Familiar back. 12. Trail of Crumbs. Autopay. Boseiju. Yeah. So Boseiju could kill the consumes all when it becomes a creature, which is nice. Any Gilded Goose is fantastic. Witch's Oven is great. Trail is great. Deadly Dispute and Korvold are all amazing cards. Yeah. Five. Yeah, now we have the Korvold. And a Goose. And we win. GG. I just want to say thank you again for watching me play some Explore Jund Sacrifice. I love this deck. I think it's really, really, really powerful. I think it's really, really good. And I would recommend playing it. I'm probably going to be doing it in the MIQ this upcoming week or two, whenever that is. But yeah, I think it's very, very efficient. It has a lot of agency in how you play and how you can navigate games. And I think it has a lot of decent matchups against the more popular decks. Though, against some strategies it might falter. Specifically, really big ramp decks where you can't really outrace them to their big spells like Ugin. And that can be very, very problematic. But other than that, I hope you at least enjoyed the video and learned maybe a thing or two. If you haven't already, you should totally like, comment, or subscribe. I stream on Twitch at twitch.tv/thenerdysteve. And I've been playing this deck a lot there, so if you want to watch me live, totally do that. But yeah, I just want to say again, thank you for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful morning, afternoon, or evening, wherever you are. Bye.